What's up, it's Cinema Shogun here, and yesterday I was hanging out with a friend, and we had kind of a Netflix and chill day. Totally innocent. But anyways, we were watching the new show Dahmer. I'm sure most of you all have heard of Jeffrey Dahmer, the serial killer. Well, there's a new series about him on Netflix, and Evan Peters from American Horror Story plays Jeffrey Dahmer. And the series so far is really good. I've seen some complaints out there because people are like, there's nothing new about this series. There's nothing new happening. It's based on historical events. Like, do you want them to add things into the story that didn't happen? If you know the story about Jeffrey Dahmer, then you will know basically most of what happens in this series. However, like, the acting is really good. Evan Peters is totally disturbing in this show. And if you're not into horror and like disturbing stuff, then you might not want to watch this. But if you're a horror fan and you're a fan of seeing like creepy, messed up performances from actors and stuff, then you'll definitely like the show. But while we were watching the show, we had a conversation about serial killers. Because she was saying something along the lines of, you know, in today's world, we don't have serial killers like we used to. And it would be harder to get away with stuff like that in today's world as opposed to back then, because everyone's got cameras rolling, you know, there's cell phones everywhere. You know how it is in modern day times. So we were talking about how there's not really any serial killers anymore. Don't get me wrong, I don't want there to be. But then I made a point that there kind of is. Like, we have a lot of mass casualty events and crazy stuff going on in today's world. And I feel like it's taken the shock factor out of it, if that makes sense. Like, we're being desensitized. We live in a day and age where dozens of people are getting, you know, hurt and their lives ended inside of grocery stores, elementary schools, football games, like you name it. So it's like we're desensitized to all of this loss of life, if you will. Meanwhile, back then, a killer could kill a couple of people and it would make headline news. But nowadays, I feel like someone could do something like what Jeffrey Dahmer is doing or did, and you might not even hear about it. That's how crazy our world is now. There's so much other stuff going on. And there's so many other news stories that I guess the mainstream media deems as more profitable or more important. So you don't even hear about a lot of the crazy things going on in this world. But we both basically agreed upon the fact that we don't see stuff like this really anymore. It's not as prominent. When's the last like serial killer that you've heard of? They don't have the effect that they once had on our society. There's a reason why people like John Wayne Gacy, I believe. And you got Jeffrey Dahmer. You got your various serial killers. There's reasons why they became like these cult-like legends within our society. And I don't think that would happen in today's world. Charles Manson, another person, totally evil. If someone did what Charles Manson did back then in today's world, would we remember him next week? Do you remember the last person who, you know, went in guns a-blazing inside of a school? No, you don't. It's like we've been desensitized to it. Yet back then, these people were boosted up and they became legendary in an evil way, but it's like those names ring bells. Everyone knows Dahmer and Gacy and Manson. But we don't know the people who are taking all these lives nowadays. But anyways, as we were sitting there, I could go on all day. As we were sitting there having this conversation about things like this not really happening in today's world, I get on my phone, and what's the news story that I see? Can you guess? Well, it just so happens that yesterday, as the new Jeffrey Dahmer series is coming out, as I'm sitting down watching this series, having a debate with my friend, body parts, or shall I say, suitcases filled with body parts were found inside of a New York apartment building. It was weird because we were having this conversation. I was watching the Jeffrey Dahmer show, and the first thing I see when I get on my phone is this news story. And for some reason, this news story is not a big news story. I would guarantee that half of you all watching this video had no idea this happened. And that proves my point that I was trying to make, that in today's society, things like this don't even have a lasting effect on us like they should or like they used to, because we've been desensitized to so much stuff. But let's go ahead and hop right into these details about what's going on, because it's scary, and let's just go ahead and dive in. Body parts were found in multiple suitcases at Brooklyn apartment. Multiple suitcases apparently filled with body parts were found inside of a Brooklyn apartment Wednesday afternoon, according to law enforcement. Cops made the gruesome discovery at 315 Linwood Street in East New York around 1:30 p.m. after a foul odor was reported in a 6th-floor home. Now, I am glad that in this case, the police actually followed up on that complaint. If you know anything about the Dahmer case, and they talk about this or show this within the series, then you know that there were complaints about him. There was the smell of death reeking from this dude's room. He had bodies chopped up in the refrigerator and freaking acid, you name it. There was this foul smell coming from his apartment, and there were multiple complaints about Jeffrey. And the police did nothing. At one point, a young man escaped from Jeffrey Dahmer. He was drugged up on all type of stuff that Jeffrey slipped into his drink. And what did the cops do? They brought him back to Jeffrey. They brought him back. So when people look into true crime cases these days, and they all act, oh my God, law enforcement dropped the ball, law enforcement did this. Law enforcement has always been incompetent. And I don't mean that as a diss towards law enforcement. There are some officers out there that do an amazing job. And when you put on that badge, regardless of what type of person you are, even if you do a crappy job, when you put on that badge every day, you're putting your life at risk, especially in 2022. And I respect that. It's a job that I don't want to do. But at the same time, we have to understand that these people are humans. A lot of them don't have training, don't have any funding. They just put on a badge and they throw them out there, and they're supposed to, do the right thing and make all the right decisions. So there's been plenty of examples throughout history of law enforcement making huge mistakes. That's why the mistakes law enforcement made in the Kylie Rodney case didn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me that they left some soda cans at the crime scene, when they literally took a man that had a hole drilled in his head and that had gotten Cosby'd. Yes, I call it Cosby'd when you slip something in someone's drink. And they delivered him back to the man who was eating people, who had a freaking apartment that smelled like dead bodies with blood stains everywhere and shit. Law enforcement has dropped the ball plenty of times throughout history. Luckily, yesterday they didn't. They went ahead and came full force to that apartment that smelled like dead bodies. Officials entered the apartment and discovered blood and human remains after receiving word that the tenant, a woman in her 20s, was unaccounted for. I'm assuming that the body belongs to that woman, but they have not identified it yet. But that's what they believe. A person of interest has been identified and has been sought out for questioning. Now, at the time of this recording, it may change by the time you watch this video. Okay? I want you all to understand that. Every time I do these news stories, someone clicks on the video like 3 days from now. Be like, this is the wrong information. They got the guy. Can you check the freaking date on the video before you leave comments like that? Anyway, at the time of this recording, They haven't caught up with this guy yet. He hasn't even been labeled as a suspect. He's not wanted. He's, I guess, what you would call a person of interest. They just want to question him at the moment. But I'm sure we could put two and two together and be like, okay, this woman who shares this apartment with this dude who can't be found, and she's cut up inside of a suitcase, I think it's safe to say that, hey, that guy, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think that's grasping at straws. A lot of times in true crime cases, people just point the finger at everyone for no reason. There's a reason to point the finger in this situation. But even though that it is so evident that it looks like her boyfriend probably did this, the police aren't being irresponsible here. They're still just saying, oh, he's a person of interest and we want to talk to him. So the NYPD was waiting for search warrants on Tuesday night. So that says that they actually got tipped off about the smell on Tuesday. But they had to wait for a search warrant, and I guess they got that on Wednesday. And they found a large amount of blood at the location. Kim Angeles, 24, who lives next door to the gruesome scene, said the building superintendent first discovered human remains in the neighboring apartment and called the police. Multiple other building residents told the Post this woman who lives in the apartment where the remains were found has a boyfriend whom she would often fight with. And as I said, he cannot be found. So we're waiting on further information about this case. As you can see, there's not much info out there. And as you can also see, this isn't really being picked up and reported on like that by the mainstream media. I've looked around at the news over the past couple of days. What's going on that's so important that we can't talk about this? You know what I mean? Why does the mainstream media not even care about these stories anymore? Is it because they're so focused on other things? I feel like every time I turn on the news, they're just talking about Donald Trump. Dude's not even our president anymore. I get it. Some people don't like him. Some people do. I really don't care how you feel about the guy. I'm just saying, like, is there not other things to talk about? And then when it comes to this, it's like, are we not talking about it because you prefer to talk about other things? Or are we not talking about it because people don't care anymore? Like, this isn't a big news story in today's world. Which is kind of the point that I was trying to make in the beginning of this video. That we as a society have been desensitized. Yes, it may be harder in today's world for there to be serial killers out there pulling off the stuff that serial killers were pulling off back in the day. But even if there were people doing that, would we ever know? How many people are walking through New York this morning not realizing that a young woman was chopped up and put in a suitcase that probably lives down the block from them? I don't know. It's really scary when you think of it's the situation, and the story is scary enough in itself. But then when you really think about it a little deeper and think about the fact that this isn't even a big deal in our world anymore, like this isn't even something that made the 6 o'clock news, that's when you gotta really question, like, what the hell is really going on? Because if something like this isn't even important enough to make the news, then imagine all of the other egregious, crazy things that are out there. But if we get more details about this, I'll let you know down in the comment. I'll let you know in a future video, but let me know what you think down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and I'll talk to you all on the next video.